Now, if you remember the position that India used to have on the global stage 30 years ago, 20 years ago, in the period before economic reforms, India was hardly mentioned. By the way, that was a historical anomaly, because if you go back 200 years or 300 years, India was one of the richest, the most industrialized, one of the most developed, one of the most prosperous engines of the world. That had been the position for thousands of years, actually. And then that changed, that went away. Now, finally, is India on an expedited path to become a world leader? Perhaps a way to also phrase it, to get back to being a world leader. We have an absolutely illustrious panel who's here to take us through various aspects on that. Mr. Gurnani, why don't I start with you, actually, because, you know, as the head of Tech Mahindra, you interface so much with people all around the world. The way they are reacting to you now would be probably very different to the way they used to 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
I know Vikram wanted to call me a veteran, but he just about...
I never said 40 years veteran. I never said it once.
Anyway, so
we're all getting there.
It's coincidental that Deepshika and you both talked about an Indian's position on the planet Earth. From my perspective, so one is as a common citizen of India. I mean, to me, when Prime Minister Modi declares that India would be a serious contender for Olympics in 2036, it shows almost the JFK moment of Mission to the Moon. It almost reflects India's ambition. It also, in a way, reflects that we have enough time to become an Olympic nation. Now the other parts, I mean, Goldman Sachs comes up with a report, and in 2075, India will become a richer country or the largest economy in the world by 2075. Suddenly, that in any conversation, 5 trillion is now given. I mean, it is just assumed that 5 trillion has happened. So I think in a lot of ways, all the moving parts which will make India proud, I think they're all getting together. And I'm really happy that some of these have happened only by exponential thinking. Some of it has happened only by recognizing that we have catch up to do. Whether it is semiconductors, in my industry, quantum computing, my industry, that AI is not about software, it's as much about hardware. And today, I can genuinely say that government and private sector have never worked better, at least in the technology sector.
Well, you know, we should also talk about the nature of human talent and the human capability, and you're all winners of the award out here, and for your own person. I wonder, any of you have a comment to make on that? We didn't get a chance to hear you on the award that you got. Anybody have a comment to make?
That's done.
Done and move on. Okay, fine. That's done and let's move on. Let's look at some of the other specific aspects of what it takes to actually becoming a world leader. I'm going to come to you next, Mr. Mishra, because bureaucracy and the role of government and the role of administration, these are things that have traditionally been considered would hold India back. That was the ball in the chain that was keeping India trapped. Was that a fair way to look at it even earlier? And if it was, have things changed dramatically now?
No, I don't know if it's fair or unfair. Certainly wrong. Because if that is what was holding you back, what is it that propelled you? I mean, is the structure changed so fundamentally that things are different? I mean, you know, you spoke about 20 years back and now. Growth story, according to me, I would not even look at 20 years back. I would look at how I am competing with the best today. And if you ask me where India is really, really outshining others, it's in that sphere. Suddenly, you have come up to a stage where you can face the best and say, I'm as good, if not better. But going back to your question on bureaucracy, you know, there are two ways of looking at it. One is the standard way, and I'm sorry to disappoint you on that, saying that the bureaucracy holds you back. It is the nature of governance which dictates many of these things. So nothing holds anyone back. In fact, it's a kind of a feeling which comes because you run a system which holds you back. Bureaucracy is not a separate entity, it's a part of that system. But if you look at what, let's say, the last 20 years story, every single spark that you have found has had some bureaucracy behind it. So it's not that they're holding you back. Yes, may not be the fastest and the best that you'd like them to be. But then, perhaps they're structured that way. And maybe tomorrow things will change and they will fulfill that ambition as well. So let's not blame bureaucracy, or for that matter, anyone. Everybody's played a role designed and tailored for him.
Well, sir, I have to tell you, I'm the son of a bureaucrat, the grandson of a bureaucrat, the great-grandson of a bureaucrat, so I wouldn't dare criticize the bureaucracy too much, but interesting to get that point of view. If you're looking at the various areas that things have to change, and I want to come to some of the things that have traditionally been considered things that could hold India back, and now you're finding a change there. Finance used to be one of them. Capital used to be one of them. You said, looking at the BSc, you're in charge of SMEs, startups. The ability for people to go and raise funding, to raise capital, to list. The fact that capital is not going to be a constraint if you want to set up a company. This would have been considered very tough to imagine, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Has that again changed?
Yeah, I think India has come a long way. If you talk about 1948, in 1948, people were asking the question, will India survive? Now we are asking the question that will India become a superpower? And I think over last 5-10 years, everything is getting aligned for India becoming superpower. Whether you talk about technology, whether you talk about finance, whether you talk about growth. If you see all the reports, last year we have seen GDP growing 7.2%. These 2 years, 23-24 and 24-25, IMF is projecting that India is going to grow at 6.3%. So we are emerging as the fastest growing economy, and it is getting reflected into the capital market. Today index is trading at almost 65,000. Raising funds is not difficult. We are seeing maximum number of companies coming and raising funds to capital market. And, in fact, this is giving a lot of confidence. In fact, as far as Indian capital market is concerned, though we are a developing country, but we have got the robust capital market in the world. We have got T+2 settlement cycle. In fact, IPO market, you are seeing that from T+6, we have moved to T+3 type of settlement. So I think overall, all the things are coming into place, not only equity, but we have got a vibrant bond market. We have got, SME platform. So in last 1.5 years or 2 years, we have seen, a lot of companies coming, accessing to the capital market, raising funds, and FIA are continuously coming to Indian capital market and pumping their money. So I think a lot of confidence we are seeing into Indian financial market as well as other places. Mr. Gurnani talked about, technology. In fact, IT services, we are exporting $170 billion. In fact, it is more than what Saudi Arabia is exporting oil. So that's how I think everything, all the things are aligning, and it is going to take India to the next level.
When there's any talk about power, becoming a world leader, obviously the military aspect of it is particularly important. India has always had soft power, but there was a question about the hard power, about building the sinews. And one of the major changes that I wanted to get your sense of that, which has also happened in the last few years in particular, is that military strength is not only based on imports. India has increasingly become capable of producing its own weapons, its own weapon systems, and that may well be a particularly landmark path.
Yeah, so Vikram, you're right. When we talk of comprehensive national power, we're talking of soft power, and we're talking about hard power. And one essential element of hard power is military power that nations require. So let me tell you some sort of basic facts. So everybody looks at India's defense budget, and it's in fact the third highest defense spending in the world. So it's not as if India is not spending enough on defense. And I think three things have happened, in the recent past. One that you spoke about is this whole push for indigenization. We still are, in fact, the period 2018 to 2022, India was the largest importer of defense equipment in the world. So that is now slowly changing, where we are saying, look, we need to rely on ourselves, because for many reasons, nobody is going to give you the best weapon technology, so you have to build it yourself. The other thing is, there's an internal reform that is happening in the military. I want to make a little distinction between restructuring and reform. So restructuring keeps happening when you keep doing small things, reorganize yourself. But there is significant reform that is taking place, where you are looking at the nature of your organization, you're looking at integration, jointness, theaterization, etc. And finally, I think a greater realization that technology adoption needs to be there much more in the military, and so studying lessons of various wars that have happened, Ukraine, etc. So I think these three things are driving modernization and strengthening of military capability, Vikram.
If I could just ask you, whenever the ambitions to do this domestically, to build weapon systems, make fighter jets, make world-class ships, that ambition had been there in the past as well. But the armed services, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, they said, look, stop forcing us into buying all of this indigenous equipment. It's not going to be good enough, and we're not going to be able to defend ourselves. It sounds as if that is changing now. It sounds as if we are actually making ships and planes and tanks and artillery guns which are competitive, which are as good as anything which you could import.
So Vikram, whenever you make a change, there's going to be some pain. And that pain is going to be felt because India never had a very developed defense industry. So while we were assembling things, but really we were not manufacturing major defense equipment. Now, with the push that the government has given and said, look, we will not let you import A, B, C, D. There are lists that have been given out by the government, equipment that has been given out, timescales that have been given out, that you will have to build this in India. I think what's also happening is not only the indigenous industry, countries outside are then looking at India and saying, look, here is an opportunity. And so if some technology can be transferred, we can set up industries within India. That is changing. Vikram, it's not going to happen in a jiffy. There is going to be some short-term gain, but I can tell you, in the long run, it's going to be of enormous, enormous advantage to India.
So if I could come back to you on some of the other major changes, Mr. Gurnani, that have happened. We've all grown up in a India where, again, people used to keep saying, how can you possibly become a world leader, or become a leader, or even become a competitor, given that your infrastructure is as bad as it is? No power. Remember how much time it used to take to get a telephone line. Look at the roads that we used to have. Look at the trains that we used to have. Look at the airports, the worst airports in the world. Now from there, that's one of the most tangible things that strike you. If you had been out of India for 10 years and you were to come back, you'd suddenly see the roads, you'd see the airports, you'd see the data connectivity, you'd see the ease of getting mobile phones. The IT industry has partly been rising on that. Do you think Indian infrastructure is now at world-class levels, or will get there soon? And in some cases, such as digital infrastructure, is perhaps the best in the world?
So as I started, and during my opening remarks, I did mention that many times, particularly in digital infrastructure, government seems to be ahead of private sector. Similarly, in the public infrastructure, you just named it. Whether it is ports, roads, airports, clearly their signs are visible. During one of your statements was a question to all of us, what can we do more or differently. You know, I end up interacting with my clients across 90 countries, and I do get the chance to also listen in to about 150,000 employees in their own way. I personally believe that both in public infrastructure, more people are now talking about the ease of doing not only business, but also, you know, why can't I work? I mean, I have a candidate who's talking about working out of Kota because he believes Kota used to be an overnight train journey. He's talking about that he's going to work out of Kota because anyway, he's supposed to come to work only for 2 days in a week, which clearly tells you is that there are benefits of that infrastructure being made available, and something which is 500 kilometers has now become accessible. The only area where I'm sure there are plans to improve, most of our associates and overseas clients have one question: why are we proud of having 5 crore cases backlog? You know, we have always been proud of our judicial system. And how come our backlog is so high? And what is it that we can do differently? I mean, the world over. So just to give you an example, when I acquired Satyam, in less than 14 months, we were able to close all our overseas cases. I still have 6 cases open, and I'm talking 14 years later. So somewhere down the line, I think the judiciary reforms have to be accelerated.
You know, it's so interesting you said that, because just this morning, talking about the theme of Indian leadership and what is required, so that was the first thing which I said. I said, things are going fine, but one thing which needs to be done is judicial reforms, police reforms, unclogging that entire system and getting it to move much faster. If you had to look ahead now at India's path for becoming a world leader, what do you think are the most important unfinished items on the agenda that we need to look at?
Well, we just spoke about infrastructure, and I guess infrastructure is the first reflection of a growing nation, and we can see that in India. But apart from infrastructure, what I see coming in days to really take India to where it wants to go is a coherent policy, an open system of governance, and perhaps one thing that I've always thought of, which should really take India big in days to come, is equity. I mean, growth will happen, growth is happening, but if it happens without equity, I think somewhere we are missing the point. So if really India wants to become big and it has growth with equity, there's nobody who can beat you.
So it will also, I guess, whatever happens in India, and if India has to become a world leader, international events will also make a major difference. What's happening in the world around you? What is the environment? At the stock markets, for example, I'm sure you're very concerned every time a war breaks out between, you know, Ukraine or Russia or Israel and Gaza. There are gyrations in the international markets. How insulated do you think India is going to be from some of that? Or do you think it's bound to have an impact here as well?
No, but I think, you know, if you see the capital market, it has to be impacted with, you know, geopolitical events, or, you know, some inflationary pressure, or, you know, prices of goods going here and there. But in last few years, what best has happened, you know, our mutual fund industry has grown in leaps and bounds. If you see, 47 lakh crore is the AUM under mutual fund. But the problem here, what I am seeing, and which I think tilt the Indian investors in the favor of the capital market, is this: that today in household savings, almost 29 lakh crore rupees Indians are investing. But out of that, only 23,000 crore rupees is directly investing into the equity market, and somewhere around 1.8 lakh crore rupees is invested through mutual funds. If some of these funds out of 29 lakh crore is directly going through the capital market, or will go through directly through the capital market, then we can balance the outflow of the FI funds that are happening. Overall, if you see the India story, you know, we have escaped the global slowdown. We are immune to the recessions that we are seeing in the Western and European countries. And by far, I think our economy is on the right track. Only thing what we want from the government is that there should be sustainable economic reforms that keep on going the way it is going on. And I think as long as the Indian investors have the confidence into the Indian ecosystem, the capital market will keep on balancing it in the long run.
So, as we end this entire session, perhaps a quick word. We're saying India on an expedited path to be a world leader. Do you think India is going to be a world leader? And if so, how much time? Why don't we go in reverse direction?
See, I think we are already there on the path. Some of the challenges that we talked about, you spoke about inequity. I think we need to start looking at aspects like non-traditional threats, climate change, can really put your sort of GDP back, cyber threats, and how we deal with these issues. But if you look at the trajectory, it's positive, and not that we in India are looking at it as positive. I think globally around the world, everybody is looking at the India growth story. Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I guess so. We are almost there. And I would put a number, 2035.
2035, world leader.
And with one caveat, climate change may put us back. Let us hope that doesn't happen. If we are resilient enough to sustain that, we are there.
Mr. Gurnani.
Again, Vikram, I have been in this tap dance for a few years. So good news is that last few years, it's only been a step forward, but India or some of us are capable of one step forward and two step backwards. So I won't like to be complacent even for a day.
Don't be complacent. Last word from you, sir.
I think we are all poised to become a economic superpower and military superpower also. The biggest advantage that we have is the demographic dividend. We have median age of 30 years, that is in our favor. We have highest population. Only thing what we have talked about, some of the reforms, what Mr. Gurnani has talked about is judicial reform, police reforms, etc. If all these things, and third very important thing, and which we have faced in the year 2022 is of increasing cyber attacks. I think we have to do a lot. 625 crore has been allocated in 22-23 budget towards cyber security, but we need to take it seriously and create a lot of awareness around that. I think if all these things, if all these checks and balances are there, then we are all set to go.
Thank you all so much for being with us. And on that note, I'm going to hand it back to the wonderful Shivani.